This is the Analysis in Chains with Nathan Williams and Neil Kieran.
Welcome to Analysis in Chains. I'm Nathan Williams, and today I'm going to be rambling about tokens. So buckle up. We're going to chat for a bit. Now, when you think of tokens in terms of blockchain, they are the bitcoins. They are the unique currency of a protocol, of a system. They serve many purposes: to transfer value, to give you access to certain data, to allow you certain voting rights. And they combine all of these functions into one digital package. But what is a token? And how have they and how should they change in 2019, 2020, based on what we learned from 2017 and 2018? I've been giving it a bit of thought. When you think of a token, the first question that comes to mind is, what's the difference between a token and a coin? You have a Bitcoin, and you have tokens for all sorts of other different projects. And what's the difference? And it depends on who you ask, but usually the only real difference is a semantic one, not a technology one. Generally, you call it a coin if it is the native token or the native unit of currency in its own blockchain. So Bitcoin would be a coin, Ether would be a coin. If you're building a system on top of someone else's blockchain, like you're using Ethereum to create a set of tokens that will run a second layer protocol, then that would be called a token. That's how I've used the term, and that's how most of the people I've talked to use the term. Now, with Bitcoin, the token or the coin is a central part of how the system works. Without the actual Bitcoins, you cannot keep track of the transactions and you cannot incentivize people to use the system. Now, I went over how Bitcoin works in episode 46, and I'll just briefly go over it again to give you sort of an idea of what is a token and why this is important when we think about how systems will operate in the future. Essentially, Bitcoin was created to solve the problem of removing a trusted third party from a financial transaction. So, if you want to keep track of bank transactions, normally a bank would just keep a long-running list of every transaction that would happen, a big long ledger of who sent money to who. Now, if you want to remove the trusted third party, what you have to do is you have to have everyone with a bank account keep a track of every transaction, and everyone keeps their own copy. The problem is, if you've got this ever-increasing, never-ending list of transactions, how do you see which one is right? I might be on one side of town and make a transaction, and someone is on the other side of town and they have a different transaction, and so our lists won't line up even after we communicate. So the way Bitcoin solved it is, in essence, to break this transaction list into blocks so that you only have 5,000 transactions, or 4,000, I think, 4,000 transactions in a block, and then to vote on which block is right, more or less. And after the majority has decided which is the right version of the block, then cryptographically seal it so that no one can change it later, and then start on the next block, and all these blocks are linked together. It's an elegant solution, fairly straightforward. The problem is that it costs a lot of electricity to do that cryptographic sealing. And that's an important part. So how do you pay people for doing that work? Well, you give them some Bitcoins. And that is essentially the function of the token. You use it to make those money transfers, and you also use it to reward people for spending their electricity to make the Bitcoin network secure. So you can see that then Bitcoin is both a digital currency, but also an incentive mechanism to make the system work. It has a certain utility within the system. The problem is there is a fixed number of Bitcoins. Problem, or maybe this is a feature. Maybe this is not a problem, but this is just the way Bitcoin is set up. There are 21 million total Bitcoins that will ever exist. That will not change. And so the more people that want Bitcoin, the more the price goes up. What we have seen is that the more the price goes up for Bitcoin, the less people trade it, the less people use it as currency. They would rather hold it. And so the more they hold it, the more the price skyrockets. And that's why we had the Bitcoin price jump in late 2017. And this had spillover effects to all the other tokens because people were excited about the new projects they were doing. They were doing supply chain tracking. They were doing rewarding of physical exercise. They were doing keeping your private data private and selling it to advertisers at your own will. They were doing health records, all sorts of interesting projects. Most of them had a coin or a token. And generally the common thread with these tokens, especially the utility tokens, would be that you had some sort of utility of that token. It would be used to reward people. It would be used to access the system. But it carried with it a certain amount of value. And as the price went up, what we saw was fewer and fewer people actually used the token. Because if the token is $1 today, and you use it to buy, for example, water from a blockchain vending machine, if the price is going to be 100 tomorrow, you probably don't want to spend that token to get your water because that water may have cost you $100. And as a result, these token designs are flawed. And a lot of them turned out to be Ponzi schemes. So if you imagine this blockchain water distribution system, and I didn't come up with this, by the way. I'd heard a fellow named Pavel Kravchenko from Distributed Labs in Ukraine, fairly well-known speaker. I heard him speak about this at a conference. And he said a lot of blockchain projects are like this. They are the ultimate Ponzi schemes, whether on purpose or by accident, because they combine this store of value with an incentive model and a payment with a centralized fee. And so if you imagine a vending machine for water that uses a token and you create a fixed amount of tokens, and then you say, well, put in your token and you get a water. So it's sort of like itchy and scratchy money. It's the Disney dollars. It's just a proprietary currency for this machine. But there's a fixed amount of it. As people start to use it and they buy their water from this water vending machine, there's fewer and fewer tokens. And so the price goes up. And eventually people will start to say, hey, this is not sustainable. But all of the value has been put into the vending machine. And so the owners of the vending machine could then dump it and then move on somewhere else. So that's the Ponzi scheme side of it. And even for the systems that weren't set up as Ponzi schemes, where you had a fixed number of utility tokens, and there was a decentralized system set up, you still had this issue that even though no one was taking advantage of you, you still had this speculation aspect where as more and more people used a fixed number of tokens, you have demand going up, you have supply staying the same, and so you have an expectation that the price will go up. And even if there's not a negative reasoning behind this, you have an incentive for people not to use the systems. Now think about this for a second. You want to create something that'll change the world. Maybe your system that you want to create is bigger than just a water vending machine. Maybe the system you want to create is health records on the blockchain. Maybe what you want to do is for the greater good. A system for managing carbon credits, averting climate change, helping to protect protected areas of the world, such as rainforests or animals. And so you have this really good project, or maybe it's just a really good business project. You know, something like financial systems to make payments easier, solving a real problem. And so what you do is you create this beautiful system, and then you run it with a token. And your token, there's 1 billion tokens, and people have to buy them, and then they can put them into a smart contract in order to get the value of your system, be it the value of the value of a better financial transaction or a cheaper one, or be it the value of helping the rainforest, whatever it is. The problem is, with the fixed number of tokens, people will speculate. And as people speculate, the price goes up. And as the price goes up, fewer people use the system. So that's great if you want to get rich quick, but it's not so great if you want people to use your system and change the world or have a solid business. But the problem is, if you take the tokens away, how do you decentralize? And think about that for a second. It's a hard problem. And the decentralization is really at the core of blockchain. How do you get the most out of this? This new technology, this technology that allows us to remove this central entity. How do you make this happen without a way of distributing the resources of the system, of transferring value, of rewarding the people who contribute to the system, and from taking value from the people that benefit and allowing them to pay? Well, before I get into an answer, because there are many business models, and there's one that I found really interesting, and I'm just going to talk about, but I don't know if it's definitive. It's just one that I have heard around the industry. But before I get into that, I want to say that this method of evaluating a token system is the general litmus test. Any system, any project, any blockchain out there has people that will benefit from it and people that will contribute to it. With Bitcoin, some people are miners. They contribute electricity to securing the network. So you have to pay them. They get rewarded with Bitcoins for giving electricity. There are others who benefit. They're the ones who transfer money between themselves. They pay transaction fees. And this is the way every system has to be. You have to say, okay, well, who's benefiting? In supply chain, in selling your data, in watching ads, someone is benefiting and someone has to pay. And so those are the two forces that have to be balanced and should be balanced by a token in order to make sure you don't need a central entity at the middle. So, the thought of the matter is to move from a one token model, a utility token, to a two token model. For most cases, at least for the cases that I'm involved in, or that I've spoken to. So, on the one hand, with a layer 2 model at least, I haven't thought this through for a layer 1 model, for like a Bitcoin, but for a layer 2 model at least, let's think about this. Let's imagine a scenario where people are selling their personal data in order to advertisers, so that other people don't sell it for them. And that's the value that gets out of that. And there's a token that runs it. We've seen a lot of these models. Some of them are for ads for social medias. Others are ads for doing exercise, like Limpo we had on the show, or what was the other one? Mithril we had on the show. And these all use utility tokens. And the question is, can we separate the utility aspect from the incentive aspect? So imagine you had a token that was a stablecoin instead of just an incentive. So value goes into the system by companies or people paying with a stablecoin. And the system is decentralized. There's no one entity in charge, but the smart contract will charge a fee for every aspect, for every transaction. And then that fee gets distributed among the people that contribute value to that system. And we can go through a couple of examples. On the other side of it, all of the other non-payment aspects are governed with a separate token. And this token acts as either revenue share or, in a sense, equity in the system. So think of it like this. You've got this system, some people get value out of it, and they transfer they make purchases, and then the people actually running all of the computers have to stake this revenue share token in order to do it, in order to make the system continue to work. And then that entitles them to get a share of the transaction fee. It sounds a little complicated, but it's exactly the way that traditional equity in a company works. We make transactions with money, and the company that we purchase things from makes profit, and then it distributes that profit among the people doing the work, and the profit from that company among the owners. Now, with a decentralized protocol, there's no owner. So it can't be profit-based. It has to be revenue-based. But the concept remains the same, that the value is transferred across with just money, with something more stable, like a stable coin. And then the people get value out of it by holding the equity coin, the revenue share, whatever it is. So let's think about a couple of examples of how that might work. Imagine something like a exchange, a decentralized exchange, where the people running the exchange and contributing the computing power would buy tokens that would allow them to run nodes. And then whenever anyone made transactions on the node, between transferring their Bitcoin to Ethereum, transferring their Ethereum to Ripple, there would be a small transaction fee, and then the transaction fee, instead of being taken by a centralized company, would be distributed among the people running the nodes. And you had to stake this revenue share token in order to run the node. That's the basic concept. What problem does this solve? And why do I think that this might be the way utility tokens go in the future? Well, it solves the problem of speculating on the payment mechanism. If a system like that, if that decentralized exchange token got really popular, what would happen? The stablecoin would remain the same, and the value of the revenue share token would go up. But that's okay, because if the value of the revenue share token goes up, then people will still make transactions on that network. People will still use the decentralized exchange. And so you don't have the problem of the more popular something gets, the less people want to use it. Compare that to the way Ethereum is now. If Ethereum gets popular and more people are doing transactions, then the price goes through the roof. If the price goes through the roof, it's too expensive to build on Ethereum. So then people will build their great big projects on somewhere else. So this is the problem we're trying to solve. I think that is probably enough for right now, but this is the sort of thing that we really do need to think about as a community. And it's not easy because all of us are used to thinking of centralized models. And that's why in 2017, even 2018, most projects that we heard about were actually predominantly centralized. It's like a company coming along as normal, doing company things, but with a blockchain aspect or a blockchain technology behind it. But the real value in a blockchain is this ability to rethink incentive models and to remove the trusted party from the middle of it. And this is a hard challenge or hard concept to wrap your head around just because it's so different. It's very different. How can we incentivize using a token? How can we stake using tokens? How can we change it so that people have an incentive to use this system? And what will the consequences be? These thoughts are coming out of observations of the problems that happened with the first utility token systems. And some of them are working. Ethereum's still around. A lot of them are still around. But as the price goes up, all of the utility token models will run into the same problem. The problem of speculation being something everyone is hoping for because a high price gives them value and gives them return versus being less used because you have a negative incentive to use all of these systems that rely on utility token. So that's my thought. Key takeaway point, split the governance or the utility aspects of the token away from the payment and keep payment with a stable coin and then just make the link between them with a fee. That's one way of solving it. Have you thought of other ways to solve this challenge? There may be others. This is just one. If you have other ways, by all means, connect with us on Telegram. Give us a call. Let us know what you think. Until next time, keep on hashing.
Thank you.